My name is Madison Clark. I am 34 years old, a single mom and an ICU nurse. And on New Year's Eve, my own mother managed to turn what was supposed to be a simple family dinner into the moment I finally understood that our relationship was never going to be the same. We were halfway through dessert at her shiny new suburban house, everyone pretending to be relaxed while the TV in the background counted down toward midnight, when she suddenly stood up, lifted her glass, and said loudly enough for the whole dining room to hear, "We are not babysitting your kids anymore." The room went completely silent. My fork froze halfway to my mouth. My girls looked at me, then at her, trying to figure out if this was some kind of joke. It wasn't. She crossed her arms and repeated it more slowly, like she was making an official announcement. No more babysitting. No more late nights. No more being your backup plan. I felt heat rush up my neck, but my voice stayed calm when I said, "Seriously, Mom." Then I added, "No more middle of the night rides to the doctor. No more grocery runs. No more repairs. You don't get to cut me off and still expect me to be your on-call chauffeur and handyman." Someone cleared their throat. Someone else stared down at their plate. No one said a word for me. So I did the only thing that felt right. I grabbed my coat, told my girls to put on their shoes, and walked out of that New Year's dinner before the countdown even reached 10. At the time, I thought I was just setting a boundary. I had no idea that when I woke up the next morning, my phone would be flooded with 48 missed calls. Or that once, but out in the driveway it was just cold desert air, and the sound of Haley sniffling as she struggled with her jacket zipper. Mom didn't come after us. Neither did Frank. For a moment, I stood there beside my car with my keys in my hand, wondering if I was really doing this, walking away from the only built-in childcare I had as a single mom working nights in an ICU. Then I remembered the look on my girls' faces when she said, "No more babysitting," like they were some kind of burden, and the doubt drained out of my chest. I buckled the girls in, climbed into the driver's seat, and started the engine. As the headlights swept across my mom's perfect new lawn and the freshly laid pavers I had helped her choose, I couldn't stop thinking about how we ended up here. For months, I had been driving 30 or 40 minutes out of Phoenix after 12-hour shifts to take her to heart appointments, push her cart through Costco, and deal with her insurance and pharmacy messes because, as she liked to say, those online portals confuse me, honey. I spent my rare free weekends in that same backyard ripping out old concrete, painting fences and handling HOA emails so she wouldn't get fined. The deal was simple. I helped her keep her new retired life running smoothly, and in return she watched Haley and Sophie on the nights my schedule went crazy. It wasn't charity. It was supposed to be family helping family. Mom was the one who turned it into a transaction the moment she stood up and publicly took back her part of the deal. As I pulled out of the subdivision, I caught Haley's eyes in the rearview mirror. She was blinking fast, trying not to cry. "Is Grandma mad at us?" she asked. I swallowed the lump in my throat and shook my head. "No, baby. Grandma isn't mad at you. She's mad at me." Sometimes grown-ups say hurtful things because they're tired or jealous or stuck in old habits. That doesn't make them right. My job is to make sure you know you are never a burden to me. By the time we reached our apartment in the city, the streets were almost empty, with only a few leftover fireworks popping in the distance. I reheated leftover mac and cheese, poured sparkling juice into mismatched mugs, and we watched a replay of the New York countdown on my tiny TV. Haley rested her head on my shoulder. Sophie curled against my side. As we whispered Happy New Year to each other, it hit me that starting the year with just the three of us wasn't a loss. It was the first clean break from a pattern that had been choking me for years. I just didn't yet know what it was about to cost my mother. The first thing I heard on New Year's morning was my phone buzzing on the nightstand, like it was trying to drill through the wood. I was groggy from too little sleep, and for a second I thought it was the hospital calling me in for an emergency shift. I reached over, squinted at the screen, and felt my stomach drop. 48 missed calls. Most from Mom, some from Frank, a couple from the house phone, and a few from a number I recognized as my Aunt Denise. For one awful moment, my nurse brain took over. Heart attack. Fall. Stroke. Something had happened after we left. I sat up, already deciding which ER I would take her to if it was serious, and called Mom back. She answered on the second ring, her voice tight, not weak or sick. I glanced at the girls still asleep on the pull-out couch, hair everywhere, blankets twisted around them. Part of me wanted to ignore her and let her sit with what she'd done, but another part of me needed to make sure there wasn't some bigger mess brewing that would get worse if I didn't face it. So I pulled on jeans and a hoodie, left a note for Haley in case she woke up scared, and drove back toward the suburbs with a knot in my stomach that had nothing to do with coffee. When I pulled into her driveway, the house looked exactly the same as it had the night before. No ambulance, no neighbors gathered outside, just a quiet street and a shiny front door. Inside, Mom was seated at the dining table, makeup on, hair done, no hospital bracelet anywhere in sight. Frank sat beside her, gripping a mug of coffee like it was a shield. Across from them was Aunt Denise, hands folded, lips pressed into a thin line. The whole scene felt less like a family emergency and more like a disciplinary hearing. I stopped just inside the doorway. "So no one is dying?" I asked. Mom rolled her eyes. "Can you not be so dramatic? We called because what you did last night was completely out of line and childish. You embarrassed us in front of everyone and stormed out over one little comment." "One little comment?" I repeated. "Telling your grandkids they're basically a burden isn't little, Mom." Frank cleared his throat. "We just think you overreacted. Your mom has done a lot for you. You wouldn't have made it through the divorce without her." Mom straightened in her chair, grabbing onto that. "Exactly. After everything your father put you through, who was there babysitting, cooking, helping you find this job, watching those girls all the time? And you repay me by threatening to cut me off from my doctor appointments and groceries, because I'm finally setting a boundary?" My jaw. I glanced at the girls still asleep on the pull-out couch, hair everywhere, blankets twisted around them. Part of me wanted to ignore her and let her sit with what she'd done, but another part of me needed to make sure there wasn't some bigger mess brewing that would get worse if I didn't face it. So I pulled on jeans and a hoodie, left a note for Haley in case she woke up scared, and drove back toward the suburbs with a knot in my stomach that had nothing to do with coffee. When I pulled into her driveway, the house looked exactly the same as it had the night before. No ambulance, no neighbors gathered outside, just a quiet street and a shiny front door. Inside, Mom was seated at the dining table, makeup on, hair done, no hospital bracelet anywhere in sight. Frank sat beside her, gripping a mug of coffee like it was a shield. Across from them was Aunt Denise, hands folded, lips pressed into a thin line. The whole scene felt less like a family emergency and more like a disciplinary hearing. I stopped just inside the doorway. "So no one is dying?" I asked. Mom rolled her eyes. "Can you not be so dramatic? We called because what you did last night was completely out of line and childish. You embarrassed us in front of everyone and stormed out over one little comment." "One little comment?" I repeated. "Telling your grandkids they're basically a burden isn't little, Mom." Frank cleared his throat. "We just think you overreacted. Your mom has done a lot for you. You wouldn't have made it through the divorce without her." Mom straightened in her chair, grabbing onto that. "Exactly. After everything your father put you through, who was there babysitting, cooking, helping you find this job, watching those girls all the time? And you repay me by threatening to cut me off from my doctor. If you need to get to the doctor, call a neighbor, a taxi, Uber, whatever. If you want something fixed, you can pay someone. I'm done being the only one sacrificing." The room went so quiet I could hear the refrigerator humming. Frank opened his mouth like he wanted to argue, then shut it. Denise stared at her hands. Mom looked at me like she didn't recognize me. "You can't be serious." "Watch me," I said. And for the second time in 24 hours, I walked out of her house. This time there were no kids to shield me and no guilt weighing me down, just a cold, steady certainty that I had finally cut the cord she kept using to pull me back. I didn't know yet how much that cut was going to cost her. The days after that second walkout were strangely quiet. I went back to night shifts, back to alarms and charting and families huddled in ICU waiting rooms. And for the first time in months, I wasn't mentally calculating how many minutes it would take to detour through my mom's suburb for prescriptions or groceries. Then the messages started. At first they were short and almost polite. "Madison, I'm sorry if I hurt your feelings. Can we talk?" Then "I miss the girls. Let me see my granddaughters. I stared at my phone between patients, thumbs hovering. She wasn't apologizing for what she said. She was apologizing for my reaction. So I replied once briefly, I'm not keeping them from you, but we're taking a break until I know you can be kind to them. That's all. The next morning another text came. Fine, I'll babysit sometimes, but you still need to drive me to my appointments. I can't do all this on my own. There it was again. The trade. The assumption that my time and energy were things she could bargain over. I didn't respond. Over the next week, the messages swung like a pendulum. One day it was guilt. After all I've done for you, this is how you repay me. The next day it was martyrdom. Don't worry about your old mother. I'll figure it out somehow. Then came calls from relatives who only had half the story. Your mom called me crying, Madison. She says you told her to handle her health alone. You know she had that heart scare last year. I listened and then said calmly, Mom is a grown woman who decided my kids were too much for her. I'm taking her seriously. She can use the same apps I used to get her where she needs to go. Some understood. Some didn't. In the middle of it all, I had my own life to piece back together. I talked to a neighbor in my building, another single mom who worked in a school cafeteria, and we set up a trade. She watched Haley and Sophie on my late nights, and on my days off I took her son so she could grab extra morning hours. I emailed my charge nurse and shifted a couple of brutal back-to-back nights into something more manageable. I stopped automatically checking my phone on breaks to see what my mother needed. It felt strange, like when a cast comes off and your arm feels too light and exposed. A week later, Aunt Denise texted, Can I stop by this weekend? I want to talk away from your mom. She arrived Saturday afternoon with a grocery bag of bakery cookies. And that look she gets when she's about to say something honest people won't like. The girls were in their room painting, so we sat at my tiny kitchen table. She asked about work, the kids, how I was sleeping. Then she sighed and leaned back. Your mom is spiraling, she said. That company she hired for the backyard and kitchen redo is already sending updated invoices. Denise nodded. She could have. But then she'd have to admit she needs you. And lately I think that scares her more than the bills. I frowned. What does that even mean? Denise studied me. For years, your mom's identity has been the sacrificial mother. The one who suffered, who gave everything while everyone else took. Some of it was real, but it became her whole story. I thought about the holiday stories Mom loved to tell, always ending with a laugh about how ungrateful we'd been as kids. Denise continued. Then you come along. Single mom, yes, but you get your degree. You land this intense nursing job. You buy your own car. You show up every time something breaks. You raise your kids without dumping them on her full-time. Slowly, people stop talking about how much she sacrifices and start talking about how strong you are. She paused. She loses the spotlight. You think she cut off babysitting for attention? Denise hesitated. I think your mom feels replaced. She doesn't get to be the hero anymore. Watching your kids overnight was the last thing she could hold over you. When resentment built up, she ripped it away dramatically and hoped you'd crawl back on her terms. The words hit something I hadn't wanted to name. I thought about every backhanded comment she'd made about my schedule, my independence, my life. Every time she told people I worked too much. Every side-by-side comparison between my girls and perfect little Caleb. And underneath it all, that quiet tension whenever someone praised me instead of her. I felt exhausted all the way down to my bones. So what am I? Supposed to do? I asked. Go back over there and pretend none of this happened just so she doesn't feel threatened? Denise shook her head. No. I'm telling you this so you stop thinking you're crazy. You're not overreacting. You're finally stepping out of a role she wrote for you a long time ago, and she's throwing a fit because the script changed. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Let her sit with the consequences. She's the one who said she wanted to be independent. I glanced toward the girls' room, where their laughter floated through the door, and for the first time I let myself imagine a future where my little family didn't revolve around putting out my mother's emotional fires. Somewhere between the cookies and the quiet, I decided I was done rushing in every time she lit the match. A few days after Denise's visit, life settled into a strange new rhythm where my phone didn't buzz every hour with some errand from my mother, and I almost believed she had finally accepted this new version of us. Then a screenshot popped up in our family group chat, one of those tiny ones you have to zoom in on. It was a photo Mom had posted on her neighborhood page, standing in front of a half-finished backyard kitchen, all concrete dust and exposed pipes, smiling like she was on a home makeover show. New year, new projects, doing this all on our own now, the caption read. No more waiting on other people to show up. Underneath, friends had left clapping emojis and comments calling her inspiring, independent, a survivor. I stared at it on my lunch break, remembering the weekends I'd spent out there ripping up old pavers in the heat while she sat in the shade pointing out tile patterns she'd saved on Pinterest. She hadn't hired help because she had no one. She'd hired help because she wanted to prove she didn't need me. At first it was just annoying, petty. Then the numbers started reaching me. Denise called one night while I was folding the girls' laundry. Your mom finally showed me the contracts, she said. Remember that 10,000 quote she bragged about at Christmas? It's closer to 20 now. I sank onto the edge of the bed. Denise gave a dry laugh. The original quote was bare bones. Then came upgraded stone, gas lines, a bigger grill, a pergola, fancy lighting. Every yes became a change order. Now there are rush fees, extra labor, permit handling, and because she started digging before filing paperwork, the city hit her with fines. HOA too. My chest tightened, not with sympathy at first, but with that sick feeling of watching someone drive straight into a ditch you warned them about. Why didn't she call me when they brought the contract? I asked. Because that would mean admitting she needed you, Denise said. And right now she'd rather bleed money than give you that win. Over the next week, the story spread through the family. A cousin mentioned Mom asking to borrow $500 until inspections cleared. My grandmother let slip that Maggie had cried about being left alone to deal with construction sharks by her ungrateful daughter. That phrase hit hard. Ungrateful daughter. The same thing she'd called me since I was a teenager anytime I wanted something for myself. Only this time there were receipts. I hadn't signed loans or hired contractors off TV commercials. She had. One afternoon between shifts, I met Denise at a coffee shop near the hospital. She already had a manila folder on the table. She slid it toward me. I opened it. 10,000, the original quote. Just under 22, the revised total. A red stamped notice from the city listing code violations. A letter from the HOA threatening more penalties if things weren't fixed within 30 days. My mother's signature on every page. This is her mess, I said quietly. Denise nodded. And she's already trying to spin it like it happened because you weren't there to save her. That stung more than the numbers. She was doing what she always did, turning her choices into my responsibility. The difference was this time there was nothing I could fix with a weekend of sweat and a few phone calls. Money owed was money owed. Late permits were still late. Contractors who smelled desperation didn't suddenly grow a conscience because a tired nurse showed up angry. For a moment, I imagined driving out there anyway, tearing through every clause, forcing the bill down, rescuing her from the wreckage of her pride. Then I pictured Haley's face when I canceled movie night again. I pictured Sophie asking why Grandma could hurt her feelings and still get everything she wanted. I closed the folder and pushed it back. I'm not getting involved, I said. Denise studied me then nodded. Good. She needs to learn that consequences don't only happen to other people. Later that week, Mom finally called. She didn't bother with hello. I hope you're happy, she said. That company is robbing us blind. If you'd been here, this never would have happened. I kept my voice steady. If you'd waited and talked to me before signing anything, I could have warned you. You chose to do it without me. That was your decision. She scoffed. So that's it? You're just going to sit back in your little apartment while your mother drowns in debt, because you're mad I said no to babysitting. I stared at the vending machine, rows of snacks behind glass. For years, I'd been her emergency exit every time the smoke rose. But I wasn't the one holding the lighter. I'm not sitting back, I said quietly. I'm taking care of my kids, working my job, paying my bills. I'm not responding. When she hung up, my hands were shaking, but beneath the fear and old guilt was something else, something close to relief. Let her learn what independence actually feels like. 2 weeks later, the tone shifted. The messages stopped swinging between rage and guilt. Then one afternoon during my shift, a text popped up that made me pause. Madison, I know I said things I shouldn't have. I was stressed and I took it out on you and the girls. Can we meet and talk like adults? I read it 3 times. No but. No pivot. I didn't trust it, but moments like this were rare. I replied, short coffee, public place, no arguments in front of the girls. She agreed almost instantly. We met at a cafe halfway between my apartment and her suburb. I arrived early, hands wrapped around a mug I barely tasted. When she walked in with Frank beside her, she looked smaller somehow, like the air had leaked out of her. She sat down, eyes shiny over untouched coffee. I'm sorry, she said. The words sounded stiff. For what? I asked. For how I spoke at dinner. For embarrassing you. For saying the girls were too much. She looked away when she said it, but she said it. Frank nodded. It wasn't our best moment. That hurt them, I said. Haley asked if you were mad at her. Sophie thought she did something wrong. They heard you. Her face crumpled for a second, the way it used to when I was little, and she realized she'd gone too far. I never meant to hurt them, she whispered. I just felt cornered. Everyone talking about how strong you are, how you do everything alone. I used to be the one people said that about. Now it feels like I'm invisible unless something is wrong with my heart or my bills. There it was, the thing Denise had tried to explain, coming straight out of my mother's mouth. You think I'm taking your... She shook her head, then nodded, then shook it again. I think I spent 30 years sacrificing, and suddenly you're the one everyone is impressed by. You're the hero now. It's stupid, I know, but it feels like there's no room for me anymore unless I'm needed. Frank cleared his throat. She's been struggling since she retired, he said quietly. She doesn't say it right, but she's scared. Scared of what? I asked. Of not mattering. That answered a lot of questions I'd never known how to ask. I leaned back, sympathy and anger twisting together. I understand being scared, I said. I understand feeling invisible. I've felt that way my whole life around you. Her eyes snapped up. That's not fair. I swallowed the hurt pushing up my throat. Maybe it wasn't fair, but it was true. And if we were doing honesty, we were doing all of it. Here's where I'm at, I said. I'm done tying my life in knots to keep you comfortable. I'm done driving after 12-hour shifts to do things you can pay someone else to do. I'm done letting my kids be collateral damage for whatever you're feeling about your own life. If you want a relationship with me and with them, it has to look different. She stiffened. Different how? I raised a finger. 1. You never call my kids a burden again. Not ever. Not as a joke. If you're overwhelmed, you say that. You don't put it on them. I raised a second finger. 2. Babysitting is not a bargaining chip. If you don't want to watch them, you say no. If you say yes, you do it without keeping score. A third finger. 3. I'm not your chauffeur or your handyman anymore. I'll help when I genuinely can and when I choose to. Not because I'm guilted into it. You have other options. Use them. She opened her mouth. Your life can't depend on Maddie being on call forever. My mother stared down at her hands. So what do I get? She asked quietly. You get chances to be a grandmother, I said. Not by right but by choice. If you can respect those boundaries and be kind to my daughters consistently, I'll bring them over sometimes. They can bake with you, watch movies, plant flowers. But if you cross those lines, I'll pull back. Noble whoops. I'll just be done. The words hung between us. For once, she didn't argue. She sat very still, then nodded once, sharp and small. I'll try, she said. It wasn't a promise or a miracle, but it was the closest thing to accountability I'd ever heard from her. We finished our coffee in uneasy silence, talking about safe things like school, work, and the weather. When I left, she hugged me stiffly, quickly, like she wasn't sure she was allowed. Driving home, I waited for the familiar wave of guilt. It didn't come. Instead, there was a thin, fragile sense of peace. We hadn't fixed anything. We just put a fence around the damage. I let the girls decide about visits. When Haley said she was ready, I took them for a short Sunday visit, stayed the whole time, and left before anyone got tired. For a while, it almost looked like this new version of family might work. What I didn't know was that my mother was still clinging to her old script in one place I hadn't thought to check yet. Online. It started with a notification I almost ignored. Someone had tagged me in a post in our private family Facebook group. My mother had posted a selfie of her and Frank in front of the finished backyard kitchen, glowing lights and stone countertops behind them. The caption hit harder than the photo. After a rough year, we finally did it. All on our own. No help, no handouts, just two old relatives were already praising her, calling her strong, saying she'd sacrificed the most. The same old story, just updated for social media. The abandoned mother. The ungrateful daughter. Except now I could see the lie clearly. I thought about letting it go. Then I pictured Haley's face that night. Remembered the 48 missed calls. The way my mom kept trying to pull me back into the rescuer role. My hands stopped shaking. I opened my photos and pulled up one of me covered in dust tearing up her old backyard. Then a screenshot of her text spelling out the deal in her own words. If you help us fix this place up, we'll watch the girls whenever you need. Family takes care of family. Under her post, I replied with the images and wrote, "The yard looks great, Mom. Just to be clear, it wasn't done all on your own. I spent months driving out after 12-hour ICU shifts to tear up concrete, deal with the HOA, and help pick materials. You offered babysitting in return. When you stood up on New Year's and said you were done watching my kids, you ended that deal. I chose not to fix the rest because you made it clear you didn't want me as family, just as free labor. I wish you'd told the whole story." I hit post and set my phone down. The notifications exploded. Aunt Denise liked my comment. Monica, the cousin with Caleb, added that she'd heard the same agreement months earlier. Someone dropped screenshots into the larger Reed family group. That's when people really started talking. My grandmother commented that Mom had borrowed money, while saying no one would help her, without mentioning she'd pushed me away. An uncle pointed out this wasn't the first time she'd ignored advice, and then wanted rescuing. Monica publicly asked her to stop comparing her perfect son to my girls. For once, I didn't rush in to smooth things over or calm anyone down. I just watched as my mother's favorite story finally cracked. No one called her names. No one attacked her. They simply stopped pretending they didn't see the pattern. Mom deleted the post and messaged me, "I hope you're satisfied. You turned my family against me." I replied, "I didn't turn them against you. I just stopped covering for you. What they do with the truth is on them." Later, Denise told me that Grandma had quietly paused the financial help she'd been sending Mom for years, saying maybe it was time Maggie sat with her own choices. A few relatives gently removed Mom from smaller chats she used to dominate. It wasn't dramatic or loud, just a slow pulling back from the chaos she controlled for so long. That night, after I tucked the girls into bed, I left the family group myself and turned off notifications. Instead, I answered messages from the people who actually showed up for us, the neighbor who traded childcare, the coworker who swapped shifts, the moms who offered rides without strings attached. Sitting there in the dim light, it hit me that this was my real revenge, if you could even call it that. I told the truth once, publicly, and then I refused to step back into the role that was hurting me. I chose boundaries over guilt, my daughter's safety over my mother's comfort. If there's any lesson in all of this, it's that you don't owe your silence to anyone, not even a parent, when they are hurting you or your children. Family is not a free pass to be cruel. Sometimes the strongest kind of family revenge is simply walking away from a toxic script, building something healthier with people who genuinely care, and letting the ones who tried to break you live with the fact that you turned out just fine without them. If this story touched you, like the video, subscribe for more real stories,